Well, that was a beautiful segue because Lar Lubovitch, not only are you an internationally acclaimed choreographer and artistic director of the Lar Lubovitch Dance Company, of course, but you too are a dance presenter as co-founder of the Chicago Dancing Festival. And why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about the background of Chicago Dancing Festival and how that came about?
Oh, well, of course, I'm from Chicago, for anybody who doesn't know that. And I always have felt that everything I know about art I learned growing up in Chicago, um, particularly Chicago's architecture, but also great museums and just Chicago culturally seemed to invite me to understand things in an artistic way. And I've had my career in New York after that, but I always felt I wanted to come back to Chicago to contribute. And when I was growing up in Chicago, there was no dance world at all. There was no dance. There was the lyric opera with Ruth Page staging her opera dances. There were a couple of very good ballet studios downtown, but the dance world slowly evolved. So that by the time the Chicago Dance Festival rolled around, there was quite an active and beautiful community. Hubbard Street had become very prominent. The Joffrey Ballet was doing beautiful work. And I just felt it was time to come back and be a part of it, contribute to it. As it happens, one of the leading dancers in my company, Jay Frankie, lived in Chicago. And somehow or another, we contrived one night at dinner to create something to enhance the presence of dance in Chicago. And we decided to create a festival and invite the best dance that we knew from around the country to show itself in Chicago. You might say to show the audience of Chicago how to see great dance and what it really looks like. And so that was the motivation. And it happened much faster and much bigger than we ever intended. We were going to do one performance at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And then we were introduced to someone in the Parks Department who had access to Pritzker Pavilion. And they said, well, why not do it at the Pritzker Pavilion? You just reach more people. So we organized a performance. We organized the best companies we could find. And the day of the first performance, we arrived at the Pritzker to find something like 12,000 people waiting to see this show, which proved very clearly there was an audience for dance in Chicago. And it was a kind of a incredibly celebratory night. People likened it to a rock concert.
Yeah, you used that phrase last time we talked about it too. And I know that it was free and that access is very important to you too. But what else contributed to that energy? Can you tell us who was on that bill that first year?
That first year, of course, we wanted to have the major Chicago dance companies on. And we had Joffrey and we had Hubbard Street, we had River North, and we had American Ballet Theater, we had San Francisco Ballet, we had members of the Alvin Ailey Company. It was a big show with big dance.
So given that it had a much bigger start than you had anticipated, what were the decisions from there? Because it lasted a decade. So how did you sort of plan subsequently following the rock concert opening? That's a high bar.
Well, we knew there was an audience, and being free was an extremely important part of what we set out to do. I think it's a highly subjective opinion. My opinion is that all art should be free, that art belongs to everyone. And so that really was the bottom line about, and for it to be free was a statement as well as a gift, you might say. Well, we grew from there to 2 theaters the next year. The next year we did Pritzker and the Harris. The next year we did the Pritzker, Harris, the MCA. By the next year after that, we had the Auditorium Theater, the Pritzker, the MCA, and the Harris. And by that time, we were bringing as many as 16 or 18 different dance companies to Chicago, and it was an entire week of dancing rather than just a single night.
And I can see how, your extensive background and all the associations that you have in the dance world probably helped put those programs together.
Yes, I had access to many people in the dance world. After that many years in dance, you just about know everybody or know somebody who knows somebody. So I was able to use all of those contacts to invite people to come to the festival.
Yeah, and we started talking about Chicago and the fact that you're a native, but it occurs to me you're Lar Lubovitch, you could have started this festival anywhere. Why Chicago exactly?
Well, I guess to go back to what I was saying before, was a sense of wanting to give back. And I just felt like I left Chicago with a great deal of knowledge and understanding about who I was and what I wanted to do with my life and about art. And I also feel that my work itself is an expression of Chicago. I think there's something very Chicago about my work, which don't ask me to say exactly what it is, but in my work, I see Chicago. And it was just a sense that I wanted to be back, give back to where I had been given so much.
Yeah, and it also occurs to me, kind of thinking back to what John Schmitz was saying and thinking about this showcase format. Here's another one where you're bringing together companies from all over the world here to Chicago. And so much of the time, these companies are siloed on their own tours and not really getting to engage with each other. That's, on top of the gift to the Chicago audiences, it seems like it would be a gift to the companies themselves. Did they have a chance to communicate with each other much?
That was a major part of what was going on backstage. Is people were thrilled to be able to work with colleagues they had either never met or had never really seen dance. And we always had a massive monitor backstage in every theater, so that whoever couldn't watch in the wings were watching each other backstage. And the backstage audience and celebrations were amazing. And people were greatly in support of each other and wonderfully attuned to each other's talents and values.
I bet. And, I, having interviewed 131 people now in our oral history format, it just comes up all the time, the Chicago Dancing Festival. I think it encompassed so much of the community, both here and, throughout the nation. Lots of people remember it fondly, whether they performed in it or saw things at the Pritzker. Are you planning on doing any more curating and assembling performances in that way?
No, that was an experiment, like everything that most artists are involved in. Everything's an experiment, really. And in fact, we knew when we began it that it would have a sell-by date. And we thought 10 years was a really good run. And we felt we had accomplished what we set out to do, was really expand the audience for dance in Chicago and show that audience what great dance really looks like so that they know the difference. Our idea was, if you're inviting someone to dinner, make it a banquet, not a burger.
I know the feeling. I think we've got a banquet going on today. I like that. I might have to steal that. Well, being an artistic director too, art doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I was wondering if over the course of working on the Chicago Dancing Festival for this 10 years, you were still, an artist and a choreographer. Did you learn anything through this process and through working in this way as producing a festival that affected how you made work?
I don't think I can specifically say that. I have always loved dance, and I've always loved dancers, and I've always loved to watch dance. So for me, it was a chance to put together the level of dance that I love to see. And so there was, great personal satisfaction in seeing that, and the opportunity to express my particular joy in the art of dance and to partake of the uplift and the inspiration that's available when you see dance. I'm very childlike in response to dance. When it's great dance, I'm removed, I'm elevated. And on that, I would like to say that one thing, an expression I'm not comfortable with at all, is when anybody calls art or dance an escape. I'm not comfortable with that idea. I'm not comfortable with that word. If anything, art is not an escape. It's an entree into a higher realm of thinking, into a more enlightened manner of regarding existence, really. By that, I don't mean to say that artists know this enlightened way. We're all flawed like everybody else. But when we make art, it comes from our higher self. And art exists to remind us that there are higher values. And dance in particular, when it's such an obvious demonstration of equanimity, care for safety of others. As you know, we spend hours in rehearsal primarily to be safe so that everyone can be free, because there's really only freedom and safety. And it's if you want to escape, you get a martini or a gallon of Haagen-Dazs, go ahead. It won't last long, but you'll have momentary escape. But the elevation that happens in the arts is not an escape. It's this entree to a higher value, everyone's own higher value. They recognize themselves in it. It's to be a little bit in the moment. I remember Martin Luther King saying something. Oh, and this is the first day of Black History Month, I believe. I remember Martin Luther King saying, paraphrasing, that until everyone is free, none of us is free. And it's very similar to what Fauci is saying right now. Until everyone is safe, none of us is safe. And that very much is the ethic of dance.
Wow, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I love that word entree. And in fact, I wrote it in my notes for your segment, entree, as you offered this entree for so many of us into dance through the Chicago Dancing Festival. And it's nice to hear a little bit about your general philosophy, because I can see that behind the festival that you created for 10 years too. And I'm just kind of curious personally, and hopefully you have an answer to this. Will we be able to access any of that history of the Chicago Dancing Festival in any way?
It was all recorded, and all of those records exist. We haven't had a discussion lately about that, but we do think in time we will compose some sort of documentary that covers that ground.
I'm glad to hear that. For sure. Please don't hate me for asking this, but were there any standout moments for you over those 10 years?
Oh, I don't think I could possibly do that. I think that I remember a moment which will sound very cheesy and corny, I'm sure, but I have to admit it's really what I said and how it felt. When I was backstage at the 11th hour and everything going wrong and trying to figure it out, and working with these marvelous stage managers and companies that were coming here. And I said to the stage manager, I said, this is where I'm alive the most.
Wow, well, I can't ask for a better button than that. And thank you for reminding me of all the things that I need to keep in the forefront of my mind today, and helping me get over nerves as I was standing backstage. Lar, it's always such a gift to be able to talk to you, and thank you for the gift of the Chicago Dancing Festival over those 10 years. I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be thanked, and lovely to spend this time with you. And congratulations on all the work you did to make this happen. It's a wonderful thing to be doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you could be a part of it.